It caught us off guard. A global pandemic of a scale not seen in a century. It affected everyone, and every part of government needed to react. The Defense Logistics Agency played a key role on many fronts for its unique capabilities and crisis management experience. This is how DLA stepped up to serve our forces, our nation, and the world. January 31st, DLA Analytics tracked initial alerts from global resources.
So early on, there was a report during our daily operations brief that there was an outbreak of a virus in China.
We were in the infancy of understanding how the virus attacked the body, but we needed to prepare for it.
There was a realization that 85% of the material that our country needed was actually made offshore. And so we quickly set about coordinating with the medical distributors, with the medical industrial base to understand what the nation could make domestically and where we were going to have to find it to meet our shortfalls.
Well before the virus hit our shores, DLA was busy in the Pacific.
So in February of 20, Korea really was the center of gravity for COVID. We worked with troop support to move the PPE that was on hand to those forces in Korea.
As the virus spread across the Indo-PACOM AOR, we were in full mode. After that, we had to go and continue that support to EUCOM, AFRICOM, and CENTCOM until it hit here in the homeland.
March 13th, COVID-19 was declared a national emergency by the President. The U.S. military needed PPE by the millions. More than 30 DLA personnel were now being positioned within the White House task force, critical government agencies, and military commands.
When the president announced as a pandemic, we started using that same model of embedding with our partners to where could we embed personnel to help those agencies as they started taking more immediate actions to combat this pandemic.
And so instead of another government agency trying to figure it out on their own, now you have that subject matter expertise that's embedded that they can just rely on to provide solutions and minimize the time it's needed to execute.
As the demand for medical materials exploded, government agencies gravitated to DLA's strengths and speed.
I view DLA as an acquisition machine. We have an enormous amount of contracts out there that support a whole wide variety of products and services.
We have many thousands of contract managers, contract specialists, and acquisitions professionals. So when you go to a place like FEMA, they had 40.
We were getting orders for FEMA, for Health and Human Services occasionally, but that really exploded once March 2020 happened. That's when we got a significant influx of orders and requirements from those agencies who were unable to procure that equipment in a timely fashion when we were.
DLA's 8 supply chains have always fulfilled DoD and government agency needs. This time, however, fierce competition for supplies required a change in tactics.
We have the medical prime vendors that we started to tap into immediately, but quickly demand outpaced supply, and we had to look elsewhere.
It was key for us to pivot and tap into the DLA Global Distribution Network, which allowed us to bring material in separately from our normal commercial vendors and allowed us to prioritize and control the material needed to support our whole of government and our DoD forces.
There was a realization early on that there's no need to have other agencies compete against each other for the same items from the same sources. HHS, your expertise is to define the technical requirements. DLA, your job is to procure those. and deliver them.
DLA provided essential medical supplies and fuel to hospital ships en route to New York City and Los Angeles.
At Norfolk, we were able to support the USNS Comfort as they took that ship from 250 patients to 1,000 patients as the ship was rolling up to New York City to support the pandemic, where we did the exact same thing at the Port of Los Angeles as our folks down from San Diego went up and supported the USNS Mercy.
So we're talking N95 respirator masks, we're talking gloves, nitrile and vitrile rubber gloves, we're talking booties to cover your shoes, we're talking gowns. Essentially any place that you can think of where you would need to be protected as a medical professional, those are the types of equipment that we were asked for immediately.
The prime vendor contracts were enormously effective for us. We had many agreements in place that we were able to place these orders immediately and have our vendors deliver timely with pricing already in place. It just turned out to be a very effective tool early on.
The Working Capital Fund and the War Stopper program were invaluable DoD strategic tools to expedite DLA's responses.
The beauty of the Working Capital Fund, right, unlike appropriated funding, gives us the flexibility to go out and procure supplies ahead of a specific demand or order.
Because we have that revolving fund all the time, we're able to go out and buy things as needed versus having to necessarily wait. And this allowed us to beat down that time enemy.
So let me first explain what the War Stopper program is about. So at a very basic level, it is a vendor-managed inventory concept where we essentially pay for our place in line to get a variety of goods and services so that when we do have that need to place orders for N95 masks, we can turn that on contractually and move forward with our order based on that War Stopper concept.
Infections and deaths from the virus were steadily rising, while job losses and hunger hit some populations. Recognizing DLA's diverse portfolio and acquisition capabilities, DLA received CARES Act and FEMA funding. DLA Troop Support and DLA Energy fulfilled medical, subsistence, and fuel orders for the stood-up floating hospitals. March 31st, the Navy reported escalating infections at sea. DLA responded through its Guam base of operations.
Supporting deployed forces, in particular the Roosevelt at the time, we were able to move very quickly using the U.S. Transcom transportation contracts and be able to distribute that PPE not only on Guam, but also in support of the USS Roosevelt.
New York City was the country's largest hotspot. Manhattan's Javits Center was converted to a medical facility. DLA Troop Support outlaid the cost and delivered medical supplies for the Army Corps of Engineers.
Anywhere they set up a new military treatment facility to support the pandemic, we were able to connect in, make sure they had access to our supply chain in order to receive medical supplies as well as pharmaceuticals.
With overwhelmed hospitals, sterilizing used N95 masks became the next White House priority. New Navy fleet quarantines required DLA Troop Support to provide 2 weeks of meals for their sailors.
We were able to get prime vendors to ship sandwiches, catering items to the loading docks within 24 hours.
As the nation found itself under stay-at-home orders, DLA was working around the clock.
These folks here in the warehouse consider themselves mission essential because they knew not a second could go by to where they can't provide a support because it had the ability to change a life.
We maintained at least 2 shifts, and in some cases 3 shifts. They were wearing masks at work. They had to wear masks at home because they knew they had to come back the next day.
Donations, distributions, global destinations all tested DLA's logistics backbone. DLA knew small businesses were at the heart of the supply chain and also saw many needed an economic life raft to stay afloat.
Small businesses are the core of our support in order to provide this equipment so quickly because they can move in an agile and fast fashion.
We were postured to use a variety of different tools to understand which companies were completely shut down, had limited access to their employees.
We changed payment structures in some cases to advance funds to those folks to help keep them afloat because we knew that we'd eventually come out of the pandemic and we'd need them.
In fact, during the pandemic, we grew about 10% in our small business efforts. So a good news story across the board.
The White House Task Force assigned DLA PPE procurement duties for FEMA and HHS.
We had instilled confidence in the White House Task Force, in HHS, where it was just, let's add another requirement and give it to DLA.
When it came to what was needed, we were ready to provide, whether it was COVID-19 support, whether it was working with the Department of Health and Human Services. We were ready to respond to the pandemic.
FEMA and DLA executed face shield orders in record time, while testing for the virus meant millions of swabs were needed. The White House next focused on 15,000 nursing homes. Seeing the expanding workload, the Department of Defense Comptroller authorized a $1 billion spending limit increase for DLA's COVID-19 response purchases.
It made perfect sense to continue to increase the obligation authority to DLA because we had the experience and the expertise to buy on behalf of the nation.
By June 2020, DLA had expedited more than 13,000 contract actions, while also finding millions of excess military materials to reutilize across the country. The following months saw the missions grow in material volumes and delivery destinations around the globe. DLA received some of the first vaccines for our military at home and abroad, and adapted to meet the sub-zero delivery mandate.
Cold chain management, especially once the COVID vaccines came into play, was huge. But one of the great things about being here at DLA Troop Support Medical is the DoD cold chain expert for the entire DoD resides in this medical supply chain.
We certainly understood the cold chain management piece of it. The biggest difference was maintaining the -20 temperature. There were temperature tails put on it so that we could determine whether or not there was a compromise in moving the material from Susquehanna to any location Oconus.
When the White House purchased test kits from multiple suppliers, they looked to DLA distribution for accountability and disbursement with the U.S. Postal Service.
We could command and control the vast amount of COVID test kits by utilizing two different locations, one that was on the West Coast in California and another that was here in Pennsylvania. So the final result was the United States Postal Service sending out over 731 million tests to the American people.
USAID enlisted DLA for international support to parts of South America, Africa, and South Asia, more than 35 countries in all.
Southcom, as the pandemic proceeded, had a tremendous need for hospitals or places to see or treat patients. And they didn't need just hospitals, but they needed them mobile. They needed them movable, and they needed them to be able to be stood up very quickly.
The country of India was in dire need and requested any support that we could provide.
We were able to support countries as far away as Nepal, India, as well as South America with vaccines.
In the end, the funding tools, the supplier relationships, and the DLA structure stood tall to serve our forces, our nation, and the world.
From the very get-go, until the vaccine was, if you will, developed, and even after the vaccine was developed, this has been a logistics fight. And DLA was there from the beginning, and it really helped the nation get through this.
I do not believe that any other organization could have provided the magnitude of support that DLA provided.
We evolved into a near wartime footing with our personnel. It was 24/7, taking what we already had in place, expanding it, but just a true amount of dedication and effort and grit.
Shipping that PPE to nursing homes when there was a lot of people dying was an important, incredibly important mission, something that we couldn't fail at.
Our folks nonstop touch everything that you see. You turn the TV on, I promise you DLA Distribution's having something to do with any events happening worldwide.
What we do here matters. We can support and help what we're seeing happening across the world. We're a part of that solution, and a part of that solution that you can't find anywhere else. That only exists here at DLA.